Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion about non-academic careers in biophysics. We have our slate of illustrious panelists here with us, representing all these different corners of the non-academic world, which I've heard people say the non-academic world is like saying non-elephant zoology. Most of the world is outside academia, so we are going to get a sense of what is out there beyond your classroom halls. All right, so maybe we'll start by asking our panelists to just briefly introduce yourself, your name, your field and place of work. All right, so we'll start with Connah.
Yep, okay. Yep, my name's Connah Johnson. I'm a computational scientist at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, which is operated by Battelle on behalf of the Department of Energy. Yep. So yeah, one thing I would say is anything I do say is my opinion and not a statement or policy of PNNL, Battelle, or the Department of Energy or any of the sponsors that we work with. And my field is generally computational science, but I specialize in microbial communities and microbial modeling, mainly.
And actually, maybe instead of going around in multiple circles, can we have you also tell us a bit about your trajectory? So starting from undergrad, how did you end up where you ended up?
So at undergrad, so I'm from the UK, if you can't tell by the accent. So at the undergrad, I did physics and theoretical physics, but I focused on biophysics. I then went to study my PhDs in mathematics of systems, so complexity science, trying to apply computational methods to complex domain problems, which domain might be a kind of a national lab speak. I never know how many people know what I mean by domain science. But the thing that I thought was the most complex was biology. So I brought my biophysics knowledge and physical modeling into the bio space and release high performance computing softwares as part of my PhD. After my PhD, I came to PNNL. So I flew out to the other side, as far away as possible, I think. And here I did some thermodynamics, looked at optimal metabolic systems, so how to get the most chemical flux through a cell, and how to high performance modeling of these communities. But as I'm being here and kind of close to the National Lab system, I've expanded what I study. So I'll be on projects by microbial communities 1 minute. I'll be on power grid resilience topics in the next, looking at time series data and spotting anomalies. And then another minute, what am I on currently? Looking at chemical computing and whether or not we can leverage chemistry to solve high performance problems with minimal energy, so energy efficient computing. So yeah, wide span of things, and then there's some I've missed that I've forgotten at this point. But as a computational scientist, I'm somewhat of a mercenary mathematician, physicist for hire, and I kind of go around and support different projects. So yeah, that's my trajectory.
Thank you. And then Sasha, could I ask you the same questions of where are you now and how did you get there?
Sure. Yeah. I'm Sasha. I'm a senior staff scientist with Illumina. For those who are curious, it's a next generation sequencing, one of the biggest companies. I've been with Illumina for a little bit over 9 years. I was born and raised in Russia. I got my master's in physics, Lomonosov Moscow State University, and it was optics and spectroscopy. My first job was in a national lab in Russia, so I worked in this high energy laser facilities, check pulses. And then I did a little bit of grad school in Russia, but I never finished it. I moved to the US and I joined the University of Rhode Island physics lab when I did protein physics, which is a very interesting field. I did a lot of spectroscopy, studying folding of proteins. I don't know if anyone did something similar, but it's quite an exciting topic. And that led me to my postdoc, which I did in New Haven, Yale, and I worked 5 years doing everything from biophysics, studying the core principles of proteins, to all the way to cells and some experiments with mice. At that time, we were looking to find some delivery vehicles that will deliver drug to cancer cells. So it was another quite an exciting experience. And from there, I decided I would go to industry because I really liked some applied topics, things that you can apply and commercialize in the future. So that's how I ended up being at Illumina. As I said, I'm 9 years here. These days, I don't do much science. I think I do 10 to 20% of science, but I'm managing scientists now. And I'm doing anything, from physics, biophysics, engineering, a little bit of signal processing. It's a good mix of everything. And I'm in Department of Advanced Science. Yep.
Thank you. And I guess up next is Alex. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me. So I'm Alex Khang. I'm currently a scientist at the Allen Institute for Cell Science. And I guess my career trajectory, I did my undergraduate studies in biomedical engineering at the University of Arkansas. And then after that, I did a PhD also in biomedical engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. And my PhD work was focused on creating these finite element models of how cells and tissues behave mechanically. So we were interested in how mechanics drives, cellular behaviors, but also how it drives tissue maturation. And all of it sort of an application towards like if we can better understand the mechanics at play, can we one day design, replacement tissues and organs that could help with, tissue engineering or regenerative medicine. Then, after completing my PhD, I did a postdoc at the University of Colorado Boulder. And there we were interested in the interplay between how the topology and the mechanics of materials influence cellular behaviors. So, there we were interested in growing biological cells in these really intricate synthetic environments and seeing how cell matrix interactions can affect things like cellular differentiation, but also the mechanics of these highly controlled systems. And after doing a postdoc for a few years, I wanted to kind of do research on a bigger scale. And I found this opportunity at the Allen Institute. And then one of the big, you know, values here is team science. So we work in these large teams and try to tackle these large problems. So at the moment right now, my official job title is quantitative cell biologist. So essentially what that means is we do a lot of imaging experiments to see how cells behave, and we're interested in studying how cells work together to go from these 2D flat sheets and how they work together to form three-dimensional structures and tissues. And the idea is that if we can better understand this process, we can also better understand how humans develop and what makes us human. And I think through that, there's a lot of potential for, studying healthy and disease scenarios, and also a lot of potential for creating these models that people can use to test drugs and et cetera in the future.
Thank you. And let's see, our last panelist, Daniel, can you tell us about yourself as well?
Hi. So I'm Daniel Koslover, and I specialize in rapid PCR-style diagnostics for infectious diseases. So I'm a biophysicist. I got my PhD at Stanford in 2014. There I worked in Steve Block's group and worked a lot on single molecule experiments with optical tweezers, trying to study nucleic acids and polymerases. I discovered in the process that I actually cared a lot more and was really passionate about designing the experiments that got me the answers rather than the answers themselves. And that really made me think that, the right place for me was industry biotech, because what I wanted to do is spend my time building cool stuff. So after getting my PhD, I spent a couple years at a nanopore sequencing startup. And then after that, switched to another startup that was working on these rapid point of care PCR style tests. These are tests where it's kind of, the challenge is you want to make something that has single molecule sensitivity like PCR, but you want to make it cheap, easy to use, and give you an answer in like 10 or 15 minutes. So it requires you to really, think a lot about the biochemistry and the fundamentals there to get everything to line up and get it to work. That startup I was at got acquired by a big company in 2020. And then last year I decided it's a lot more fun, I think, working at startups than at big companies. And so I went and founded my own company in this space. And I'm currently working to build that.
Excellent. So for our attendees, since I didn't really do a full intro here, what we're going to do is we'll have some seeder questions to get people started. If you have questions from the audience, you can type them into the chat window, or if you raise a hand, I'll be trying to keep an eye out for that, and then I can allow the attendees to talk and ask questions directly. So feel free to ask as we go along. All right, and meanwhile, let's see, I'll throw some questions out there. We don't necessarily have to go around the full circle on every question, but maybe I'll ask the panelists to kind of wave a hand at me if you have something to say in response, and I'll ask you to unmute. Okay, so I'm going to break this up into two chunks. The first is going to be how does one acquire a job in the non-academic world? And the second one's going to be what is life like in the non-academic world? Because I suspect both are of interest to people here. So starting with that first one, since we probably have a lot of trainees in the audience, maybe the first question is logistically, what sort of opportunities in your place of work require a PhD, and which ones require a postdoc as well as a PhD? Or rather, for people who are currently on the fence of should they go down that postdoc route or not, would you recommend it, yes or no, in what circumstances, if they are not going to academia?
I mean, I can start on that. So this is from the perspective of industry biotech. I found that I really don't think it makes a lot of sense to do a postdoc necessarily if you're going into an industry career. What I've seen is that that's more or less seen as like having already been in industry for a few years. I don't think it really does a lot to necessarily help you get that first job in industry, unless with the rare exception of if what you do as a postdoc is directly applicable to whatever it is the company is that you're applying to. But that in practice, that doesn't happen very often.
So I think the other three of you mentioned you did get a postdoc. Yeah, Connah. So did you find it useful?
Yep. So my postdoc was at the lab that I'm currently a computational scientist at. So I continued on after postdoc. So to kind of zoom out a little bit, so we do have post-bachelors, post-masters, and then postdocs are our three kind of post doing a degree level positions. So they're all temporary positions for up to 3 years. And then after that, it's do we hire you on a staff? Do you have enough support? Have you got enough connections? And then we have a open compete process. So we don't guarantee there is an open compete process with other people, which if you go to the lab websites, all the labs will be the same. There'll be a website that has the places open. But the positions open based on projects. So a project has identified a need. We need a need for this person with these capabilities, and then that's what you're applying for. So sometimes going to the postdoc gets you around a set of lab appropriate skills. So that in itself is predicated on all the national labs have their own little expertise. So each one will have a different set. So you really will be focusing on one or two of them. And then it's down to Department of Energy, which funds did they put out there for, who are they looking for. So it's can be quite hard to navigate. Yeah.
Maybe I can go next. So I work at the Allen Institute, and it's a nonprofit, so it's a little bit different than industry. It's a nonprofit research institute. And for here, I think essentially all scientists have PhDs. So if you want the job title scientist and above, a PhD is required. In terms of doing postdoctoral research, I think that's not a strict requirement, but it does help and it does count towards experience. So speaking from my personal experience, since I had done 3 years of a postdoc, it essentially made me eligible to come in as like scientist two as opposed to a scientist one. So it was counting towards experience. And I think for a lot of the job postings that we have right now, especially for more senior scientist positions, they do require some level of postdoctoral experience. And I think it can be a conglomerate of doing a traditional postdoc in academia or doing having some industry experience. So all of that is counted towards experience.
I can add, like, for the Illumina where I work at, I don't think you're required to have a postdoc. Although I agree with everyone who just mentioned, it counts as an experience. Although I have one to be very specific, it's not. You have to add some sort of a coefficient to that. So if you want to be exceptionally pragmatic and the fastest way to build a career, you just start the industry, at least the company where I am. You start with the PhD, and usually the industry experience counts a little bit more than the postdoc. Although I myself spent 5 years as a postdoc. And my advice, if you're really interested in a project, you're really passionate about science, then do postdoc, right? It's about your choices and preferences, right? If you just decide eventually you want to do biotech, then I would suggest start right away after your PhD and go there.
Okay, I guess that brings us right to the next question, which is, did you have some sort of tension about making that transition out of academia to the rest of the world, or was it kind of the natural, smooth progression for you?
Maybe I'll start since I was the last one to answer. To me, it was very natural. My boss, PI, supported it 100%. I knew that basically if you stay long enough as a postdoc, there's like a diminishing chances getting the job outside the academia. And I knew I didn't want to become a professor, right? So I basically had two options, continue and apply for professorship or looking something outside. And yeah, it was quite natural for me. Yeah.
I'll jump in and say that there was tension, but in retrospect, I think a lot of that was internal. Like, I think like most people, I started grad school planning to be on the tenure track, and then getting used to the idea of not being an academic really requires a certain mental effort to really get over that hump and be comfortable with that. So I think that was sort of the main tension. But externally, I mean, one of the problems you run into is when you're at a university, everyone around you is an academic. And so people don't really know what it means to do science outside of academia. So I'd say there was some tension in that. And, one of the things I advise is absolutely go out and meet people who are not in academia, who are doing science, and learn about what the world is like.
Okay, maybe I'll just jump straight off from there to ask the question I get a lot from grad students, which is where do you find these things? How did you find your job? How did you encounter it? What's that magic word, networking, that everybody keeps throwing around? So how do you take that first step?
Maybe
I'm doing. Oh, go ahead, Alex, please.
Oh yeah, sorry. Maybe I can start. I think, I guess in my case, it was a little bit serendipitous. I just found the job online, the job posting online, and I applied, and I got interviewed, and I got it. So I think it's but where networking plays a role. So how did I find out about the Allen Institute? So I think the person I was working for in Colorado, she used to be on the scientific advisory committee of the Allen Institute. So I had kind of someone on the inside who could tell me the ins and outs of this place and could tell me their opinions on, like, is this a good place to do science? Is this a good place to grow as a researcher, etc. And that was really helpful in me deciding to apply. But yeah, in this case, yeah, for me it was a little bit knowing who I knew in terms of my boss at the time, but also using that experience to decide whether or not I wanted to apply to this place. And then maybe another thing, I would say networking at conferences is also really important. So I know for us at the Allen Institute, we have a presence at a lot of the biophysical conferences. I think oftentimes we will be advertising open positions. So if you ever see us with a booth, go up and talk to us. We are networking for the sake of like trying to attract, good talent, but also just to share and learn more, scientific concepts.
Yeah, I think when people think of networking, they think of like socially awkward small talk over drinks, and that's not really what I found to be productive in this sense. Like I got my first job by first talking to a grad student who was in a different lab doing similar stuff at Stanford. He referred me to an alumni of that lab who was working locally in industry. That alum referred me to his boss at a particular company. The boss looked at my resume and said, well, we don't have an open position now, but I have a friend who just started another company in town. I'll refer you to him. And that's the company I ultimately got my first job at. So that's where this started off, by talking to people who are basically in my field and who have gone in that direction. So that'd be the first thing I'd say, is talk to people who come from relevant backgrounds. And the second thing I'd say is leverage LinkedIn. I know that I've heard some people nowadays seeing LinkedIn as like an old person's network, but I've got news for you. It's old people who have the jobs and you need to impress. So, get connected to people on LinkedIn and find excuses to reach out. Ideally, if there's people and companies or positions that you think are really interesting who are graduates of your same university, or ideally graduates of the same program, just cold call them and ask them for advice and ask if there's opportunities at that company for you. So I think you'll be surprised to discover that a lot of people are eager to help.
I think we had a question from the audience, but the hand went down. I'm sorry, there was some delay there. Oh, wait, it's back. Did I find it? There it is. Okay, so Nick, did you have a question?
Yes, hi, can you hear me? I was just gonna ask if being on your side of things, being in those institutes and those labs, how valuable is it for us to pursue an internship? I guess it's kind of similar to what you guys are talking about now, but I was just curious about that.
Yeah, Connah?
Yep. So internships, so we have SULI programs. There's another program that's equivalent to SULI, but in autumn. So these are just summer undergraduate internships. Lab internships, I think is what SULI stands for. That is kind of a natural pipeline. So you get into the lab, you know how the system is. We aren't the same as academia, but then we're probably close to academia than industry, kind of this weird middle ground of doing science but applied. So having someone that knows that, is used to that, knows how we operate, like they are a natural, if we need this person for this project, we might reach out. If you're the PI, or we might know who might need. So it's a great opportunity to do that networking. And just to kind of second what has been said previously, it's often the person that knows the person that you know is the one that you need for a job offer. So interns are a great way to at least either, yes, I want to work at this place, pick up my network and get to know people, or I know I don't want to work at this place, don't bother with the job process, because that could be quite a lot of the times. So it tells you what you want to know, is a very valuable thing about an internship.
Thank you.
I have another question here from Savnik.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My question is, what do you think should be the mindset for an early career person to search for such opportunities? After PhD, I have 3 years experience in university's high performance computing center. I'm trying to look at a bigger project, like one of you said, probably, I believe, Alexander, right? So I'm looking for something which can create a bigger impact, something which I have worked previously in the computational modeling of cilia, right? So that's a high focus zone. But since then, I transitioned to the university's HPC, widened my horizons. What kind of job should I be looking for? Because postdocs, I was looking for a long time at maybe university or national lab postdocs. Maybe Connah can chime in also. But what should be my mindset now?
Yeah, maybe I could start. I think you have some very marketable skills. So I know here at the Allen Institute, we value computational scientists who have, modeling, cell modeling skills, but also those who have had experience with high performance clusters, because we also use HPCs in our day-to-day work. I would say, in terms of to answer your question where you should be looking, I think right now there's a really big push on, especially at nonprofit research institutes, to develop what are called virtual cells. And so essentially the idea is that can we perform enough experiments and develop these complex models into the sense that we understand cells enough so we can run, experiments virtually. And I think that type of movement is going to require a lot of individuals with your background with computational modeling, but also HPC. So I would recommend look at our website, see if there are any good open positions, and then look at places like, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the biohubs there, and then also the ARC Institute has been doing a lot of really great work as well. So there are a lot of interesting places I think you could look.
Thank you. So okay, maybe going back to the general cases. So if you have do you have advice for somebody in their third, fourth, fifth year of graduate school about what they should or should not be doing right now in graduate school that maybe you wish someone had told you back when you were in that situation? Yeah, Connah.
I think one thing that can be overlooked is the soft skills, particularly in industry, the hard skill, the technical skills of the science. That would be great if you're staying at your university where you have a network, but trying to convince other people that you know what you're doing. It's not just a case of you knowing what you're doing. Convincing them that you know what you're doing and convincing them that you will be a good colleague as well. That's kind of a big thing of the lab. Like it's not just you can do this thing really well. If you're gonna kind of flourish, you need to be able to speak to other people as well. So networking is a way of actually just developing those skills for free. But yeah, time management is a big thing. All these soft skills that if you neglect can be quite detrimental.
I'll second that, but also say that the single best thing I think you can do to broaden your career prospects is to be able to give an engaging and interesting talk, particularly to a group of scientists who are not in your field. Usually if you do an interview, after getting your PhD, you'll be asked to give some kind of talk, and in practice, it's usually, some sort of shortened version of your defense. If you can convey to your audience why what you're doing is interesting and exciting, and you put on a good show, employers are going to forgive you for not having worked exactly in their field before. They're going to see you as a smart person who's someone who's interesting to work with. And so that will open all sorts of doors for you. So single most important thing, be able to give that good, engaging talk.
All right, so maybe if some of you have been involved on the interview side of things before, meaning not as the candidate, but as somebody interviewing for a position, what would be the biggest red flags or conversely green flags that would get you really excited about somebody as a potential candidate?
I think I'll start. I've been on quite a few panels, different levels. So I assume the question more for a PhD level, right? I think I'll agree with Daniel, like presentation skills, engagement, excitement is important. Being able to understand, the questions, because sometimes, people from different fields, not exactly who work in your field, they will come from completely different angles, and you should be able to understand and explain it in a very general term to person who is not an expert in your field, I think this is important. In terms of red flags, I don't think there's one particular. I think there, in many cases, they're different. So I can give you like one example. I personally think it's not necessarily a red flag, but I would definitely discuss it with my colleagues. If a candidate, for example, would passionately complain about his boss, about his colleagues, how bad he or she treated, or like how smart they are, and the other people don't understand how great they are in their research. So definitely I would, even if that's true, if something like this happens in your life, either leave it for later or be very careful about how you word it, during your interview. Yeah, that's my suggestion.
I'll second that and say, if you're inevitably going to be asked, why are you leaving academia? And if your response is, because I hate it so much in academia and it's terrible and I hate my boss and I hate my lab and all that, that's going to be a red flag. You should be running towards doing exciting things in industry, not running away from academia.
Yeah, I think I also second that, and I think it goes with what the previous question was. So like I think soft skills are incredibly important. So come in, give a good talk, be really excited about your science, because I think excitement is very contagious. So if you're excited for what you're doing, it's like very positive chance that other people are going to be excited about it as well. And being just a great storyteller. And having been on just a few hiring rounds, I think something that I really enjoy is when the candidate has done their research on us and have read some of the papers that we've published and then have questions for us, like have really nice scientific questions for us. And then it becomes more of a scientific conversation when they're interviewing as opposed to like us just grilling them. So I really like when a candidate can transition to having us just talk science.
Okay, so the notion of soft skills has been brought up a few times. What about when it comes to the non-soft, the hard skills, perhaps the technical skills? Biophysics is a strange field because I think most people don't really know what it means. Like you can be a biophysicist with totally different skill sets or different groups of skill sets within one person. So do you have thoughts or advice on whether one should lean into that breadth and kind of portray yourself as somebody who can bridge across multiple fields, or whether you tried to go for depth and say, this is my area of expertise that I am the world expert on, or how to balance this business of when you say you have a degree in biophysics, no one knows what that means. Yeah, Connah.
Yeah, so I'm in similar position. So I'd say my PhD was in mathematics with systems. So I trained to do the math to describe these systems thinking, the systems of view system thinking, to do high-performance simulation, and that's kind of my bread and butter. I happened to do it in biology because I decided a long time ago that biology was cool, so biophysics. What I find more now is I am often the translator. So there's projects where my role is kind of translating between the math people and the bio people, because it's only really biophysicists that can do that, understand both fields enough. You don't need to know all of biology, but if I can use the correct, I know that a transcriptome is going to give me this data that will fit in with this this AI model, for example, then you're very valuable for that. The way I kind of cultivated that was I was actually attached to a biology lab. So I was constantly interfacing with these other scary fields, the people that I don't know. So over time, just don't stay insular in physics or your biophysics group. At least see what the other fields in your grad school are doing. That's what I would recommend.
I think what you stress should depend a lot on what type of job or company you're applying for. One thing you might want to appreciate is that very large companies that have thousands of employees, when they hire someone, they're looking to hire someone who has a very specific skill set to meet some particular need they've identified internally. This is very different from a startup that's got, say 10 people, where they can't afford to hire experts for every little thing. And what they want are people who are capable of wearing many hats and jacks of all trades. So depending on what that company is you're applying for and what sort of responsibilities that they would want to give you, you need to be able to stress one or the other.
Yeah, just want to add. So eventually, when you're interviewing, you just need to connect, basically make this connection, how your skills or experience will add value or help the company, right? I think this is the key, because in every case it's different. You need to do research, you need to understand what this particular group is doing or what the company is, and you need to find what am I doing or what experience I have that will be useful and will add value to the company. And then you need to clearly vocalize it and kind of explain it, because biophysics is a very general thing. Maybe you're like expert in lifetime fluorescence, and this is exactly what someone needs, or you wrote some complex image analysis scripts, or you like do some very specific qPCR or PCR, and that's exactly the lab is needed. So I think that's your job to understand it and to make this connection, right? And then to tell whoever is interviewing you. Yeah.
So that's a great point. I'm wondering if some of you could share some of those connections. Like, what very specific technical skill from grad school or postdoc were you able to leverage into your first job to say, like, this, I can bring this to the table and it will be useful for your company? Beyond giving talks, which I absolutely agree with, but on the technical side.
Understanding the biophysical fundamentals of polymerases and their interactions with nucleic acids, and saying that based on that, I'm able to work on sequencing applications, nucleic acid diagnostic type things. All of that plays in. That's probably the biggest for me.
Yeah, for me was, and I guess maybe most of the people can also relate. It's because we are kind of an interface by physics. You sort of understand biology a little bit, physics, a little bit of engineering. And that mix was exactly what, people wanted to see, because eventually when you get to work on the complex systems, building complex systems, you need to have an understanding in a separate fields, right? And that overlap, that's what's valued.
Yeah, Connah.
What I used before was domain, so domain science, and that's kind of adding to this point where you have that domain of biology. You're still doing your mathematical, physics, engineering approach, but you have something to then do it in, and it's that additional thing that kind of separates biophysicists from biologists and the physicists. So it works for many fields, but just domain there's just something to latch onto, and that's kind of the main thing.
Just because I'm curious, did you find it sufficient to say, when applying to that first job, I have mathematical skills relevant to biological systems? Or was it useful to dive deeper and say something about, I'm an expert in, I don't know, PD numerical solutions, or studying chaotic dynamical systems, or something very specific like that?
Yeah, I talk about mathematical biology, so I would describe myself as a mathematical biologist rather than a biophysicist. It's PDEs, standard numeric analysis. Give me a problem on fluid flow, I can solve it. That's not bio. Or the physics version will be mechanics, engineering. Like, we can do those things as well, but I would rather do it in bio because I'm interested in it. But it means you're at least applicable to those different the value added. You can be put into different domains if needed.
Alex, how about you? Did you have a specific thing you could pull from grad school and bring up to your future employer?
Yeah, I think my place of employment, I think the common theme that links every hire is that we've had some experience with cell biology, whether it be experimental or computational. We also hire software engineers, but all of it serves sort of this cell biology aspect of our work. Yeah, so if you have wet lab experience, that is useful. You have computational experience, that is also useful. I'm sort of in the middle. So one half of my PhD was experimental, the other half was computational, and I found that both were incredibly useful. Now that I do a lot of computational work now, but my experience in the wet lab is also very helpful, so I can talk to other scientists, productive conversations. Even though I'm not doing those experiments, I can at least offer some advice from my experience.
Okay, so maybe to address now the elephant in the room that wasn't there when we all were going for our first jobs, but I suspect the current crop of grad students is thinking hard about, how have you seen AI changing either what you are doing in your current job or the process of hiring at your current company? Or maybe nothing at all. I don't know.
Maybe I could start. I think when I was doing my PhD, large language models weren't out yet, so we used to have to program a lot on our own. And what that looked like was we would search, if you didn't know how to do something, you would search Stack Overflow and other forums and then see what other people have done and then try that out. So it was a lot of iterating, even writing complex functions with other helper functions. It was a lot of iterating. I think to some aspect, AI has helped a little bit with that, where it essentially abstracts away simpler functions. So short answer, I would say AI has made our lives to some extent easier with coding. Here at the Institute, we use what's called GitHub Copilot, which helps us a lot in terms of, recommending um, at times good ways to write functions and etc. But I would stress that it doesn't replace what we do. At the end of the day, we're still scientists, and a lot of the thought that goes into what questions to ask and how to answer them is still it's the part that really makes us scientists. If anything, AI has made us more efficient at what we do, but it's not the silver bullet of what makes us a scientist.
I found that there are a lot of companies that have tried to use various statistical or computational tools to try to get the most out of their data they can. One thing you might hear about in industry a lot that you don't hear much about in academia is this thing called design of experiments, and these, partial factorial experiments, ways of like systematically varying a whole bunch of variables, so that you don't have to test each one by one and you don't have to do quite as many experiments. So I think a lot of AI stuff I could see as really being used in that same way. But I think really it's for experimental scientists, I think it's really just another tool in a toolbox. And I haven't seen a lot so far that's directly affected hiring or what people are doing day to day within that, wet lab space.
I'll put Sasha on the spot as our big company representative. So does Illumina send all its resumes through a big filter of some kind of AI before you ever get to see?
I don't send. I don't know, maybe someone else. Maybe it's a good idea. Well, thank you for suggesting this. We have Copilot. I think it's encouraged our company's policy. I personally use it not often, just maybe generally to do some search, kind of a little bit more advanced search than Google, right? But if you ask some other departments, we have now our own AI department, right? Where people will try to extract as much information as possible from all this huge genomic data. We have departments that do software, development. I'm pretty sure they're way more involved with this than I myself, from the experimental standpoint, like physics, biology. I think you can use AI to help design experiments or design a oligonucleotide sequence, for example, maybe something like this, but it will not make important decisions for you, right? At least not yet, right? All important decisions you'll be making now.
So since we have a kind of a variety of different industry sectors represented here, is there something you would say is kind of special or unique about your type of work, whether it's type meaning startups, big companies, nonprofits, government labs? Is there something that makes them different from the others? Yeah, Connah.
So what I find unique about the national lab system is we are answering, for funding opportunity announcements or notice of funding opportunities, depends on which year you're in, from the government. So our main point is sent by the government, and then we're proposing to that to then do our research. So it's a very applied, but there's still a bit of fundamental that we want to be doing in everything that we do. What it does mean is you're not got the full academic freedom, because there is some constraint. There is a brief that you have to match, which I assume would be similar to industrial, and the more industrial, as I say, we're kind of in the mix. And the consequence is you often on multiple projects, like you're capable of doing, you have a unique capability that you can provide on a lot of projects. You tend to be on a lot of projects. So as I say, you can be doing many different things within a week. You're not focused on developing one instrument or something like that. I imagine might be other companies, but you can be. It requires good time management, but it means you get to do a lot of interesting things. And if something's not so interesting, then later on down you'd be doing something else instead. So it kind of balances out in the full. So yeah, that's quite unique.
I'd say in startups, I found there's a lot less inter-office politics and a lot less posturing for promotions. I mean, if you're talking a small company with 20 people, like there's like this usually the CEO and there's the head of R&D, but like after that, titles are kind of meaningless, and I found that's actually kind of conducive to better teamwork, just because people are spending less time trying to climb the ladder. Small companies also, of course, they've got less money, but they also have a lot less bureaucracy and organizational barriers. So provided you can get the resources, things can actually get done surprisingly quickly.
Yeah, I would say the thing that we focus on that is slightly different than the other sectors is being at a nonprofit research institute, we are not particularly interested in working on things that make money. So we really are not too concerned about the translational aspect or creating a product. I think I heard one of our senior directors say that if we were a company, our product would be knowledge. So we do a lot of basic science and foundational science with the understanding that one day this could go on to be used by, some tech company to create something. Or we also practice what's called open science, where everything that we do gets published and is available for free. That includes some of the cell lines that we create. So one of the big services that we've provided in the last 10 years was creating, cell lines with fluorescent tags that people can request and use for free. So cell lines are incredibly difficult to create, and that's sort of a service that we were interested in providing for the broader community. So
Yeah. Well, Illumina is basically selling instruments and solutions. So we highly depend on the profit and operating income, and there are certain consequences of if you work in mid-size or big company. The health of the company depends on these numbers, and whether your particular performance are good or not, you will be affected by the overall performance of the companies, of the company, the financial health of the company. That's one thing. So the other consequence, because we want to launch new product, and I'm working on R&D, the opportunity to do some fundamental research is very limited in these companies. So in the end, everything needs to be converted to sales and kind of bring some dollar value, right? Doesn't mean that we don't do fundamental research a lot. We have a lot of patents, a lot of cool and interesting projects, but just keep in mind it's not something that you will do in academia, right? Where you can propose something, very fundamental, that would not have any particular applications in the next 5-10 years, right? So here there are certain limitations on what you can or cannot do. Yeah.
So we're got about 10 minutes left. So I want to encourage, if the audience has questions, to go ahead and raise hands. And we'll call on you. Here we go. Christopher.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
What's your sense of how healthy the job market is right now? I used to work in pharmaceuticals, and my sense is that field has been shrinking for at least 2 years. But how do you see things? Thanks.
Very quick answer from me. I see the same way, but just my experience.
I mean, things have been rough in diagnostics, particularly. We're kind of off our COVID pandemic high, but I've been seeing things lately suggesting that things are starting to turn around and getting better.
Questions? How about your day-to-day life in terms of the nitty-gritty of what you do when you show up at work every morning? How much, what's the pacing like? Are things seasonal? Are there busy periods and slow periods? Is it more or less constant? How much time do you spend on the computer versus with a pipetta versus talking to people or something else?
Yeah, maybe I can go. Yeah, so I'm a computational scientist, so a lot of my work is at the computer. But from day to day, usually in terms of pacing, I think it's generally a pretty constant pace here. I think we have overarching goals that we're trying to meet yearly, like annual goals. And then also there are some times when it can be um, our workload can be increased, particularly during our scientific advisory committee meetings. So those happen every year. So oftentimes we want to put together a good story to show our scientific advisory committee that this is what we've been working on, and these are the things that we've done that are successful. That's usually all hands on deck because we want that to be really nice and pristine. But in general, day to days, I think it's a good pace. I don't feel like I'm burnt out or anything. I also to say that in terms of meetings and talking to people, I would say I average about 1 to 2 meetings a day. It's usually more just about, trying to reach consensus as a team and trying to decide together where we are going because we practice team science, meaning that not one person dictates where we're going. It's usually all of us discuss and then we decide what the best path is.
We did have a question from the audience, Sarthak.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, with all the visa issues going on right now, is like industry and national labs and nonprofits are unable to hire non-US citizens and supporting them for like visas like EB1B or O1?
I do believe Illumina has this program, although lately, there were some changes. So basically, I think you have to be eligible to be hired, right? But if later you will need visa sponsorship, I believe, potentially, yeah, that's possible.
Yeah, and I always say, I just took a quick look at our careers page, and many of the scientist positions that are open does say that this opportunity offers work visa sponsorship. So I can't comment on the specific visa that they may sponsor, but short answer, it's a possibility.
Would one of you be willing to describe your picture perfect day at work? We all have our down days and our up days, but like your favorite day at work would look like what?
I'll go. Probably do not attend unnecessary meetings, when people discuss budget and how much pay this person and that person. I enjoy talking with smart people, sitting in the room. So I'm now in a conference room, just sitting in the room. I have a whiteboard behind me. We just discuss some cool ideas, and write them down and maybe come up with some experiments. I think this is the best thing about, working on some like really complex technologies, complicated problems. I have to say I don't have often those kind of meetings and moments, but those are definitely my most joyful and favorable time, I spend here at Illumina. Because I think we're all in core like scientists, and we just want to, we're very excited about talking about science.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, just kind of second that. Like when meetings aren't too onerous, there isn't too many meetings of kind of management or talking strategy and things like that. But for me, when we've just started a new project and we're in the exploratory phase, like trying to see where we can take this, and then a few in-person meetings, which we have both in-person and virtual meetings quite regularly. So yeah, and naturally code working and Copilot doing its job. That makes it a good day anyway. But yeah, trying to really leverage the exploratory and trying to deliver what we are aiming for, and that's always quite nice.
So maybe final little wrap-up game then. Why don't we go around in a circle with our panelists, and I'm looking for a one-word or short phrase answer for what do you miss most about academia and what do you miss least about academia? Maybe we'll start with Alex.
Yeah, what I miss most are my friends. So a lot of friends in academia, and I miss my colleagues. What I missed the least, probably grant writing, fellowship writing.
Okay. Sounds like in Connah's world, you can't get away from grant writing, if I heard correctly. Okay, so that still exists there. All right, Connah, what about you?
I know what I miss least is yeah, grad school, PhD, postdoc can be quite isolating at times when you're the only one doing your topic. The way we do it at the labs is very much a team science based thing. You are that expert, but it's part of a team to perform the get the deliverables. So that's what I miss least. What I miss most, um, yeah, it's getting to know other people from the different fields. Like we don't have a philosophy department in a national lab, but kind of seeing other talks and kind of those random talks that you seem to only have in academia because it's less focused. That was always nice to experience. Yeah.
Daniel.
The thing I miss most is my job being about learning things. Like I honestly miss taking classes. I like learning things that way. The thing I miss least though is probably the whole publish or perish mindset. It makes people very hyper competitive about things that, leads to a certain degree of toxic atmosphere. And, I think there's a lot less of that outside academia.
And Sasha?
What I miss the most, just being able to fully focus and do fundamental science, going to conferences, read papers. It's a pleasure. It's a great pleasure doing this actually. what I don't miss, I actually liked a lot academia. It's not a lot of things that I didn't like. Probably, when you submit a paper and you have to kind of answer the reviewers because they didn't like something, or okay, taking physics classes, that was quite painful. So not classes, sorry, physics exams. I remember I took it second year. That was brutal. Yeah.
Any last questions from the audience? Last chance. Okay, I guess at this point it's 12:30. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all so much for coming, for joining us, for sharing your experience and your advice to those who might be going down that pathway shortly or already are. And I guess I wish everyone the best of luck, panelists and attendees included, in all your career tracks.
Thank you
Thank
for
you. It was a
organizing.
pleasure.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
thanks for having me.
Thank you.